How's it going, everybody? Velociraptor here for EventHubs, and we got a ton of Mortal Kombat 1 content today that we want to dig through right now. Today's official Lin Kuei trailer showcased a bunch of new information and content for Mortal Kombat 1, including brand new playable characters, new cameos, and some of the emerging story that's coming out of the game. You can read all about that on the EventHubs front page. What I want to do for this video, though, is dig into two characters that we've known were coming for some time, but haven't seen showcased until today, and those are Scorpion and Johnny Cage. Fighters that come back from the very beginning of Mortal Kombat but have evolved in some pretty interesting ways. And then I want to talk about the Kameo system a little bit because we learned some new stuff about that, and specifically we got to see what Kung Lao as a Kameo character is going to look like. So without much further ado, let's jump into this. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and let's take a look at the new and updated Johnny Cage. Johnny Cage is still Johnny Cage very much so, and he's going to have a lot of the attacks that you know and love, but they might function in a different way as he's no longer a projectile character. They've gotten rid of his projectile completely, and he no longer has, well, that like green aura, the shadow moves that he used to perform. He still does a lot of those moves, like his trademark shadow kick and such, but he doesn't have that green backing behind him. He's more grounded and more of a very real human character as opposed to having some crazy plasma powers and things like that. So in this game, he's all about mix-ups, rushing you down, popping you up, because of course this Mortal Kombat has air combat back for the first time since I think they said 2006. So Johnny Cage wants to get in and go ham on you, and he has all of the tools that he needs to do so. One of the interesting moves that I think really feeds into this style that they showed off during the Kombat Kast is his dash. He's got a command dash that he can actually do not just once, but twice, and close the distance very quickly. And if he does it while he's right next to you, he zips past you. And so you can already just begin to theory fight on all of the different things you could do with this move. I don't know if you can use it to cancel in the middle of combos and extend combos, but you could certainly set up for mix-ups, get a knockdown, zip past your opponent, things along those lines. I can already see this being a total headache for people trying to defend against Johnny Cage. Here we see that he's got a bunch of his old moves back, the flip kicks, the shadow kick. Of course, he's got the nut punch, things along those lines. And then we get to, out of nowhere, they show off this unique mechanic that is special to Johnny himself. No other character has this particular thing. It's called a hype meter. And being the proud, egotistical Hollywood actor that Johnny is, as he plays to the crowd and the crowd responds, you can hear little audio bits of the crowd getting hype for him. This meter builds up, and the way he does it is he lands certain special moves, and then he can choose to taunt out of those special moves. So you see he does the kick here, and then he does a little Jean-Claude Van Damme from, I think it was Kickboxer, although he's probably done this in half of his movies, where he, moves his foot around and shows total control, and that gives him a little extra hype meter. He can also just turn to the fans, give a nod with his sunglasses, a couple of different taunts here. And once the hype meter is filled, Johnny Cage can activate it, and then he goes into a special mode for 10 seconds, it looks like. I tried to time it. They didn't have the timer on in game, but 10 YouTube seconds, we'll say. When hype meter is active, Johnny can then cancel special moves into special moves. And so we'll see him do 3 nut punches in a row or 3 shadow kicks in a row. His combo potential goes through the roof. And when you think about what this is going to look like when you add in the potential for cameos, oh my gosh, this is going to be a combo monster. And as we got to see during the match at the end of the Kombat Kast, the hype meter does indeed carry over between rounds. So you might spend the round just building it up and then launch into it in the next round. And as we see here, Johnny can really lop off some damage with it. That's not all though. When he's in this mode, he can also use special enhanced versions of moves. So the EX versions without spending meter. He can only do this once per combo. So it's not going to be as crazy as you might think at first, but still a huge buff to get here, and it's really going to come down to how often are Johnny Cage players going to be able to pull this off. It looks like you're giving up a lot of damage or maybe follow-up pressure in order to build this meter, and even the activation seems to take some time. So we'll have to see what the particulars are here, but there's a lot of power in this special mechanic, and it's not his only special mechanic. The developers showed off this second unique mechanic that, as far as we know, is only for Johnny Cage, where it involves countering throws. So what happens is, if a Johnny Cage player techs a throw, they can then spend 1 bar of meter and Johnny will break his opponent's arm, and for what seems to be about 10 seconds, the other character is unable to throw. Tyler Lansdowne is just mashing throw here, and you see Sub-Zero is just doing nothing. So you take throws completely off the table for your opponent for a limited amount of time. This game has a lot of layers, a lot of potential strategy to it, and it's exciting. So the other character that the Kombat Kast put under the microscope for us was none other than the trademark, probably the most popular character in Mortal Kombat, save for maybe Sub-Zero, but we're talking Scorpion. And he's very much still Scorpion. You're gonna recognize him the moment he pops up on screen. He's got the iconic "get over here" or "come here." I think they use those interchangeably. And he's got some core moves from all the way back in Mortal Kombat 1, namely that spear and his teleport, where he Pac-Mans his way onto the other side of the screen. He also has the Hellfire move from Deadly Alliance. We haven't seen that in a while. They note that it's no longer an unblockable, it's a low, and then the EX version has unblockable damage over time kind of properties to it. This is still clearly Scorpion. Like I say, you'll instantly recognize him. He's got a lot of his trademark moves and some less obvious callbacks, like the multi-kick combo from Mortal Kombat 3. A version of that is in here. I should say maybe Mortal Kombat Trilogy or Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, because Scorpion wasn't in MK3. But he's reasonably different outside of those first kind of recognizable aspects of him. For one, he uses his spear in his standard attacks now in a way that we saw in the live action Mortal Kombat film from 2 years ago, I think it was, where he's just zipping it around, whipping it in front of him and behind him to make for a lot of his standard gameplay. This might mean that he has a little bit more range than we're used to with him, so maybe he fights from a little further back now, but this game also has air combat, meaning you can launch foes into the air and then start to go into some sequences in midair. We're not even talking about the extensions that can come from cameos, but Scorpion seems to be flourishing when he goes to the air, namely because he can use that spear to whip people and to strike people from fairly far away, but he can also use it to pull you back to him and extend sequences. So he's still the same Scorpion we know and love, but he might be doing a lot more fighting from the air. And when you start to introduce, as we'll see in a second here, the potential for cameos and the sort of strategies that you can go into, you might be using the same character, but if you pair them with a different cameo that has different abilities, the different approaches you could take to this game seem vast. And that leads us nicely into the last thing I want to cover for this video, and that is cameos. Now, we've known about cameos since we knew about Mortal Kombat 1, but the developers went into a little bit more detail today, and they showcased specifically Kung Lao as a cameo character, so I want to dig into that. But first and foremost, it's very clear that cameos serve to diversify the fighting styles and the approaches, not unlike the different variations that the previous Mortal Kombat games offered. So you can go in with one character that might have a particular weakness, like we learned earlier that Johnny Cage doesn't have projectiles, and maybe your game is suffering because of that, so you pick a cameo assist that has a lot of projectiles, and then maybe you cover your weaknesses that way. Otherwise, you might want to enhance some of your strengths. So we also learned that Johnny Cage is a combo and pop-up monster. Well, hey, Kung Lao also happens to be a cameo assist that is filled with pop-ups and combo potential, so maybe you want to do what you do even better. But the choices are yours, and it's going to be really exciting seeing how different high-level players use these combinations. Another thing that we saw today was cameo assists that didn't directly attack the opponent. We know that most of them do, and even some of them attack both characters on the screen, a la Jax's ground pound. But today, we saw Scorpion pull Sub-Zero backwards, basically out of harm's way, and it wasn't an offensive attack at all, it was just a defensive maneuver. Similarly, Kung Lao has his teleport, and he can take your character and zip them to the other side of your opponent. Your character can come out of that teleport and attack, but the cameo itself doesn't do any kind of damage to your opponent. Kung Lao has had this teleport all the way back since Mortal Kombat 2, and as we're seeing, all of the cameo versions of characters tend to be old school nostalgic member berries versions of him. So Kung Lao has Mortal Kombat 2 spin, the Mortal Kombat 2 teleport, and they even teased, without showing it sadly, that he's going to have one of his Mortal Kombat 2 fatalities. I highly suspect that it's going to be the cut you in half the long ways one, as opposed to just the whatever cut your head off with his hat one, and I gotta wonder what that's gonna look like with Mortal Kombat 1 graphics attached to it. It was gnarly in Mortal Kombat 2. I can't wait to see it in modern times. One last thing, the developers mentioned that some of the cameo characters that haven't been revealed yet are ones that we haven't seen in over a decade. So we're talking characters that have popped up in MK9, for instance, but we haven't seen since, and any of the characters that popped up in the 3D games that we haven't seen. All right, guys, that's the gist of it here, where there's still plenty more to dig into from just today's showcase, but let us know in the comments what you think of everything that we saw thus far. Are you hyped for old school Kung Lao, new school Scorpion? Are you as hype as Johnny Cage is for Mortal Kombat 1? Let us know. Thank you so much for watching. I've been John Velociraptor Guerrero, and we will see you in our next video.